Good day. It's Tuesday, August 9th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. This is the Western Standard's daily live news, opinion, ranting, guest interview show. We run this Monday to Friday, 11:30 till I get sick of talking, usually by about 1. It'll be a little earlier today when we wrap up because we're holding that UCP frontrunners debate tonight. So we got to get over there and get set up and do a lot of stuff at that bar. YYC Downtown is the name of the venue. So good to see you all checking in from all over there. Barb in Calgary, Susan and Hannah, Mike in Squamish. We got people all over. That's why I'm moving on to good day rather than good morning. For some of us are out in the east side and they're into the afternoon already. So yes, use that comment scroll, guys. Let's make it interactive. Send those questions my way. Send them for my guests, comments, discuss things with each other. Just try to keep it fairly civil, though. We don't have to be scrapping with each other any more than necessary in there. But I really do appreciate using the comment scroll and seeing that interaction going on out there, guys. That's what makes it worth doing it all live, because it's a workout. All right, let's look at a couple of the daily observations and see what's important today, the things that made it worth getting out of bed, the things that you want to make sure you don't want to miss sending a card to somebody or something. It's National Polka Day. Yes, this is the big one. If you're into polka, and who isn't, this is the day you're supposed to be celebrating this. Call your polka buddies. Get out and do some polka. As you can see that picture up there of course, Canada's most famous polka band. That was the Schmangy Brothers, who used to get together with SCTV and sing their hit single, Cabbage Rolls and Coffee. And for those not old enough to remember that SCTV stuff, get out there and look it up. It's some of the best Canadian stuff that was ever produced. I don't think we'll see the like again. And yeah, John Candy was at his best there. So today is National Polka Day. It's also National Book Lovers Day. This is one I can really, get behind. I mean, I've always been a voracious reader. That's been a thing with me. And this is the day to celebrate those books. Literacy. I mean, come on. Talk about one of the things that brought modern society and civilized society up to the level where it's at. It's that ability to get things out in books and document them as well. It's just great entertainment. It's falling by the wayside too much. Even myself, I find myself staring at my phone way too much when I should be opening a good book. And I just started recently on reading some actually old fantasy novels again. I used to read those a lot. And it's been really good for me, reading those every night. I read way too much news and political content, as you can see, I need to for this show. But boy, it overloads your head with stuff. And getting out there and just reading something entertainment now and then is really good. So it's Book Lovers Day. Get out there, take out a book from the library, buy a new book, give somebody a book. Just keep that literacy going, guys. It's important. And yeah, it's the day to talk about it. Okay, let's see what we got in our guest list. We're going to have Melanie Risdon coming in again. She was in last week, but that's the Wild Rose, Western Standard reporter here at Calgary. She puts so much out, and she does so many of those specials and video productions and things like that. And she's been doing that series on the COVID freedom heroes, and it's been very well received. Lots of people have been watching it. She's getting near the end of the run on that, though, of course, she's always producing other stuff. And we just want to remind everybody what's coming up next and some of the past shows that have been there. So when you put your book down after, the book celebration today, just turn it on and check out some of the stuff Mel's been putting together. As well, you're going to have David McLellan. He's of Social Catfish. These guys sent us a release, and it's interesting. It's an online site. Catfishing, I guess, it's that term for false identities going around online and sort of rooking people in and ripping them off. They think they're speaking to a real person on the other side of the internet. They think they're maybe even building a relationship, and it turns out it was all a scam. Well, their site helps prevent people from being catfished and, save them that grief and possible even financial loss, or at least the humiliation that can come from those things. So that'll be an interesting conversation as well. All right, let's get on with what I'm going to talk about. And it fits with the debate that's coming up tonight. So let's talk about the UCP government. And I mean, they've always been nothing but all talk, no action, really, since Jason Kenney became the Alberta Premier in 2019. Let's not sugarcoat it. Kenney promised long, but delivered short in both of his campaigns, the one to lead the newly formed party and the one to become Premier in the 2019 general election. And while it's not yet clear even if Kenney understands why the members of his own party kicked him to the curb just 3 years into his premiership, but his successor had better understand it. Albertans are sick and tired of being led down the garden path by politicians. A new government's expected to make substantial changes upon achieving power. People anticipate innovative policy initiatives and a changing of the guard in senior bureaucratic positions. And that just didn't happen with the Kenney government. Yes, we saw a new cabinet and some policy nudging, but mostly we just saw talk and talk and talk and talk. Notley spent 4 years stacking the already bloated and inefficient Alberta Health Services Administration with her ideological kin. The UCP didn't even find the courage to fire Dr. Verna Yu, though, until last April. How could the government even dream of bringing about any kind of healthcare reform when they allow the top managerial job to be held by an NDP appointee? So, of course, nothing changed with AHS in their time in. One of the first things the UCP government did upon being elected was to set up the Allen inquiry to investigate foreign-funded opposition to Alberta's resource industry. The inquiry proceeded to talk and talk and talk and talk. They dragged their asses, continually delayed the report. Meanwhile, those who do oppose Alberta's industries had years to cover their tracks and work to undercut the work of the inquiry. By the time Steve Allen finally released his report, the inquiry had basically been discredited to a point where people didn't take the conclusions seriously. We spent millions and wasted years. The inquiry did find that nearly $1 billion in foreign funds were dedicated to attacking the energy sector, but nobody really cared by the time it was done because all they did was talk. The much anticipated energy war room, $30 million. That flop did a little more than create a few micro scandals and issue press releases and talk. Kenney understood that Albertans wanted to stand up to Ottawa, so he set up the Fair Deal panel. And guess what they did? They talked and talked a lot more and then talked some more. And when they're done with that, they talked some more. Then they released some findings and the government talked about the findings and talked and talked. Have we seen any policy set out for the Alberta pension plan? No. Police force? No. Stuff that was suggested by Albertans from all of that went to the wayside. And in more recent issues, the government's been no better. EMS workers have been warning of a service crisis for years. They've been holding town hall meetings and practically shouting from the rooftops of a growing shortage of resources. They've also been proposing solutions to the crisis. It's not like the answers weren't there for the government. It's fallen upon deaf ears, though. What's the government done? Well, they struck a committee on it last January. And since then, they've talked and talked and talked. In fact, they just announced that they haven't talked enough, and they're going to delay that committee's conclusions for yet another month. I guess from January to talking wasn't enough. And while they were talking, an 86-year-old woman bled out in her backyard waiting for an ambulance when she was just 9 minutes from the largest hospital in Alberta last June. In response to that tragedy, the UCP announced that they're going to strike a task force and talk about the issue for at least 4 more months. I guess the health minister forgot they already tasked a group to talk about this last January. You can't make this shit up. One of the most lucrative jobs you can get in Alberta these days is getting on a committee or a task force appointment. Then you can waste years spinning your wheels, deferring your reports, and fade into obscurity after dumping a pile of pages upon the government that any intern could have compiled with a few weeks of research. All while drawing, of course, an eye-popping salary. The next UCP leader is going to have about 6 months as Alberta Premier before having to face voters in the general election. There's only so much can be done in that short period. But if the new leader, tries to gut the government in such a short order, it will cause chaos and likely will usher in Notley for another term in power. But that said, this leader is going to have to make it clear that some changes are forthcoming and they're going to be seriously following through on promises. If the new leader can't convince UCP supporters that they plan on taking some actions rather than just talking and talking and talking as they have for the last 3.5 years, Conservatives are going to stay home on Election Day and likely will usher Notley back into power. Talk is cheap and voters are sick of it. All right, that's what's got me going today. Let's, of course, I talk for a living too. But either way, I'm not taking any of your tax dollars for it. So let's talk to Dave Naylor. He writes for a living, and that's more socially acceptable, and see what's happening out there in the world of the news. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm not taking any tax dollars either, Cory.
Yes.
Hey, big debate tonight. I hear you're the timekeeper.
I am. I've been tasked with that critical, important role of sitting there and madly waving those time flags when the candidates, of course, always insist on talking past their timing limits. So I'm getting pumped up and prepped for that.
Can you not just sort of like get a big air horn and blow it? I mean, that would shut them up pretty quickly, wouldn't it?
I was thinking a water pistol would be great, but unfortunately, Derek just throws my ideas by the wayside.
He's got to listen to you more, man. Got some good stuff on the website this morning. Led off with our Chris Holdcorn. Got a really good exclusive out of Saskatchewan, where some, I guess, rogue social workers have been vaccinating foster kids without any sort of consent whatsoever. They just grab the kid, take him to a clinic, and get him vaccinated. So that's got some family members upset. Speaking of COVID, a Ottawa police detective has been suspended charged with discreditable conduct for investigating whether there was a link to COVID vaccinations and injuries and deaths and stuff like that. So that wasn't looked on favorably by the brass, and she has been suspended. Red Deer MLA Jason Steffen has got a column up talking about why he supports the Sovereignty Act in Alberta, and that's an interesting read. I guess there's some outrage in the Hispanic community that a white actor, James Franco, has been selected to play Fidel Castro in a new biopic of Castro's daughter. And the complaint is that they just take white actors and make them brown face and take away roles for Latinos. So our Mike Thomas has an interesting column. Certainly he knows somebody who's got lots of experience with blackface, and he was actually a drama teacher once, so he probably could act. So that's Mike's suggestion for who should get the role. Leslyn Lewis, Tory candidate leadership or candidate for the Tory leadership, says she hates politics. So I think she's probably running in the wrong race, but she explains why and how politics has become all about hate for her. We have a tragic story in outside of Canmore in Spray Lakes. Guy was out fishing on a boat. His dog jumped in. He jumped in to try and rescue the dog, and the cold water took them within seconds, and they were both went under, and both the dog and the owner died. Very sad story. And Cory, we got a story coming up that is going to make you outraged on from our Linda Slobodian on Manitoba, one of Manitoba's most notorious criminals. This is a mother who basically tortured a 5-year-old to death, her 5-year-old daughter, shot her with a pellet gun, believe it or not, made her eat her own vomit, and a doctor described the child's injuries as what you would get in a car accident. That's how bad they were. Well, she's done well in jail. She's got a full-time job in jail, Cory, so they're going to let her out on some day passes. So isn't that nice for her?
Oh, yeah. Good for all of us. It's just pathetic.
Just pathetic. Is exactly right. So, all right, Cory, we'll see you at the debate then.
Yeah, you bet. We'll move on and maybe, again, find some people who can come up with some better policies, law and justice-wise and in general for us.
If only we could.
Right on. Thanks, Dave. I'll talk to you a little later.
Bye-bye.
So that is Dave Naylor, our news editor in the newsroom. And yes, as we see Chris Oldcorn with stories, and I'll be talking to Mel, and Dave's hard at it. And you can see in the background there, Jonathan Bradley was leaning over, working hard at his desk there. We've got a full office and people across the country working on bringing this stuff to you guys. And the reason we're doing it is because you guys have been taking out subscriptions. So we really appreciate it. Subscribers have been fantastic. And the more, the better, though. If you haven't subscribed already, get on board, guys. $10 a month, $99 for a year. There's a free trial to give it a crack, and you can see all of these stories. I mean, we put up more content than most of the mainstream online sites you'll see. And you get unfettered access to it for that low rate. We're not asking for a donation. We're selling a service. We're saying, hey, you get good news copy, not controlled by the government, good and independent for the low rate of less than $10 a day if you take it out for a year. Check it out, Western Standard News/membership, and take out a membership, guys. I'm going to hit on one of our sponsors before we get on to the next thing, too, because, like I said, today's a bit condensed. We're going to be running out as soon as the show's over to get set up for that debate tonight. And we will be streaming it as well, by the way, if you can't make it in person. So this is that reminder. Are you tired of having leftism ran down your throat everywhere you turn? I know you are. Everybody's tired of that. And are you frustrated by businesses, of course, giving your money to leftist causes? Bed Bath & Beyond, some of those other ones. They're opposing your industries. They're opposing your life. Yet you buy their products. That's not what you bought them for. Well, Resistance Coffee is here. They're here for you. And they are anything but leftist. These guys, hey, this mug came from there, so I can drink my liberal tears during every show. As well, they make excellent coffee. I see a couple of the commenters are saying they already got some from these guys. And if you buy your first purchase, they'll ship it to you. It's a Canadian company. You get 10% of your purchase goes towards good organizations like the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and 10% comes off. You go to resistancecoffee.com/triggered, and that's like 20% off. You get good coffee. You stir up liberals. You cause more of those liberal tears. It's just winning all around, and it helps us with our sponsors, of course. So check them out, guys. Get on there. Resistancecoffee.com. Buy some swag. Buy some coffee. And use that /triggered and get 10% off your first order. Take out a big one. That way you get that extra 10% off while you're at it. All right, let's see some of the stories that are going on and things that are happening. Yeah, that was pretty tragic with that dog in Canmore. It's a reminder to people. I talked a little bit about that when there's some other hiking issues and things that happen out in the mountains. I grew up in Banff. That's my hometown. I was talking a bit about that in the newsroom. Like, some people underestimate too and just don't think about it, how cold those lakes are in the mountains. It's not like Ontario or down here on the prairies and the flats. It is glacial water, and it is bone-chillingly cold. You can't survive more than a couple minutes in that water. They used to call Lake Minnewanka up from Banff the drown-proof lake when I was a kid. People drown in it or die in it all the time. But it's because they'd fall into the water. They can only paddle for a couple of minutes, and hypothermia will take them, and they go down. So we saw that happening in Spray Lakes and Canmore, and that's just up the hill from there. It's beautiful back there, but that's high country, and those lakes are cold, and we keep seeing that. Wear a life jacket. This is one of my rare public service things to nag a little bit. I'm usually not the big safety guy. I used to be the pain in the butt worker for all the guys when I was in the oil field, when it came to safety rules and things like that. But some of it's common sense. Wear a life jacket. Get out there on those lakes. This guy jumped in after his dog. Hey, I can relate with that. I love my dogs. I'll do darn near anything for them. But if you're going to be especially alone in a boat in a mountain lake, wear a life jacket. It was just a terrible, tragic end that really didn't need to happen. And there was a group of 2 or 3 guys that also died and drowned when a boat tipped over on those same lakes this year. That's the second time this year we've seen that. Both cases, they weren't wearing life jackets. So just my little public service, because we don't like reporting on these stories. What we'd rather report on is a video that somebody put in and say, hey, look at this. This guy's pet jumped out of the boat, and the guy jumped out with his life jacket on and rescued his own pet and put it back in the boat, and everybody got home safe. But unfortunately, it ended terribly poorly. LinkedIn user saying, what about the murder of that guy in a bathroom bar? I think that was in Banff as well. That was recently. Yeah, I'm kind of out of touch with Banff these days. I don't go there that often any longer, but that was the first murder in a long, long time since, what's her name, Trumel? Lucy Trumel? She was a cab driver in Banff about 30 years ago. So, Banff is known for its generous spreading of social diseases and things like that, but it's typically not a murder capital and usually a safe spot. But, you get drinks, you get jerks, and you get people sometimes still killing each other. That happened in Banff recently. Either way, we want people to enjoy the summer. We do like reporting on some positive stories here. Those do happen. We know that. So let's just do some things to avoid making more of them. But, of course, I like stories that get me angry and get you angry as well. And this is one. It's CBC, I guess. They're claiming they're tightening their editorial controls now after it published a website commentary depicting white pensioners and Conservative Party voters as bigots. Well, welcome to the show, guys. I'm glad you realize that that's a bit of a problem, And it was basically, this was a story from just after the last election from an election poll worker who was saying that she was basically having a hard time wondering if every one of these white people coming in, if they actually hated her because they were casting a ballot for a Conservative. Because that was the impression then that this columnist, this opinion writing was saying, is if you voted Conservative, you're obviously a racist, hateful person. Lots of people with that idiotic belief, fair enough. But not all of them get paid to write a column for the state broadcaster we call the CBC and put that garbage into print like that. That's where the problem comes about. So it says quite a bit when, even the CBC's ombudsman has said, okay, this is not cutting it, guys. The CBC's been spanked for misinformation. These guys get $1.5 billion tax dollars a year. It should be the best news copy on the planet. Yet they're constantly doing retractions, corrections, and getting spanked for crap like this. Seriously, I don't have a problem with left-wing media and so on and biased media. That's fine, as long as you correctly identify it as opinion. And it doesn't take tax dollars. Hey, if you want to get sponsored by union members or some business is dumb enough to sponsor a left-wing group or whatever, you can put out, Karl Marx in his manifesto and things like that, if you like, Das Kapital, and have a whole discussion show on it. I don't care. But once you start taking the tax dollars, theoretically, you should be putting good content out, and that hasn't been happening. All right, let's talk about somebody who's been putting out some good content, and that's here at the Western Standard. We got Melanie Risdon in the studio today. How's it going, Mel?
Very good. Very busy.
Yes, I know. It's been dragging you out and putting you in here, but
That's good.
It's self-promotional because it's just been such great stuff you've been putting together. That series has been so well received, and I want to just keep reminding the viewers, hey, we've got these episodes coming out. You're getting, I think, 6 out of 7 of them are now been released, is it?
That's right. Yeah, we have our last one going out on Thursday. Yeah, tomorrow. Or, what day is it today?
I know.
It's Tuesday. No,
so the
we're
day
going
after
out Thursday.
tomorrow,
Yes.
And that's the COVID Freedom Heroes series. So if you want to kind of go through some of those episodes, I know we covered it before, but there's some new listeners, and I really want to make sure people don't, because it gets pushed down in that social media scroll and all those videos too. People don't want to miss it. It's not just a clip of Cory ranting. Whoa, there's a good COVID Freedom Heroes packed in there in the YouTube or Rumble scroll.
Yeah, and so we've really tried to, really involve the people, and having them tell their stories. So pretty much every single episode is involving, people. We're interviewing the people through. Now, our first episode was Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and of course, we interviewed John Carpe, who is the founder of JCCF. And JCCF is an interesting body. They've got about 15 or 16 staff lawyers, but they also do, considering how busy they've been throughout the pandemic, actually, they have actually contracted quite a few lawyers from across the country as well to help with fighting everything from the fines and the tickets that people got sort of individually, but the very large constitutional challenges as well. We had one in Alberta here with lawyers Leighton Gray, Jeff Rath, and they were fighting against the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dana Hinshaw's medical orders, the public health orders that were restricting businesses from being able to practice. And so that was an interesting one. Plus, the JCCF has also been instrumental in the fight against the travel mandates, the federal travel mandates, and quite a few other charter challenges across the country. So many lawyers are being commissioned daily by them to help with some of these challenges. And then, of course, we had part 2, which was Free to Fly. And this was co-founded by 2 Canadian airline professionals, Matt Sattler and Greg Hill. And they started it in April of 2021, but it grew because so many aviation personnel were starting to be affected by mandates that came down sort of closer to the fall of 2021. And of course, there are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. Well, we know millions of Canadians that are affected and were not able to travel through that time. So I believe their membership for Free to Fly has grown to about 50,000 aviation professionals, as well as Canadian travelers. And their main goal was just to sort of influence public opinion to begin with, but they have now moved on to a legal challenge and hoping to ensure that those travel restrictions are never put in place again for Canadians or aviation pilots. And the other side of that too was they were making it very public that there are many aviation professionals who have suffered a vaccine injury from this and are no longer able to fly. They also sort of grew the awareness that there are several other aviation professionals who are too afraid to admit some of the symptoms they are experiencing because they know their licenses will be pulled and they will no longer be able to fly. So it has sort of introduced a bit of risk there in that aviation sector. So pretty sad. And then there's more.
There's
We had
more, I
yes,
know.
part 3, James Coates with Grace Life Church. We were covering that fairly heavily when everything was unfolding with that church. The church was, all churches were limited to 15% capacity. In the beginning, many of those churches followed suit and did what they felt was being asked of them to keep their congregation safe. But as more and more information came out, it was starting to sort of unravel the idea that people were in grave danger from COVID. So at one point, James Coates from Grace Life decided he was going to open the doors of his church and allow his congregation to come as they felt safe to, which often meant they were, having services of well over the allowed capacity based on the regulations. So he has actually too put together a book, and it's called God versus Government, and it's sort of a biblical perspective. He has a master's in seminary, and he co-authored it with somebody who also has a master's in seminary. I'm sorry, I don't know the co-author's name at this point, but they really dove into sort of the ideas behind when it is appropriate as a believer, as a faith-based person, to follow government rules and restrictions and whatnot, but when it is also not appropriate to follow. So
it's a big philosophical question. I mean, yeah, the old "when in Rome," or do you leave things for God to deal with later, or do you deal with that today? That's some big questions for people of faith, and that was a big part of the whole COVID lockdowns. I mean, for people of strong faith being separated from their religious institutions, their social networks, things like that, it was very hard on them. And
yeah,
I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding. Like, I am an unapologetic atheist. I've always made that, but I fully respect the right of other people of faith to hold their congregations and have that right protected. I mean, free religion is essential. Some of the worst abuses against citizens in human history have been based on people's faith.
yeah.
We can't take any of that lightly. I mean, it's just looking out for your neighbor's rights, that gets forgotten, because some people, well, I don't go to church, well, I don't care. Well, no, you should, because it really impacts us all.
Yeah, you're right. And the idea behind it is that it becomes a slippery slope. Where does the line stop? Where does where do the restrictions end? When can a person stand up against them? What are our rights? So this pastor really kind of took a hard line, drew his hard line in the sand, biblically and publicly, and just really said, we are not going to live in fear, and our congregation is not going to live in fear. He invited anyone who felt that they wanted to come and gather and worship, and those that felt unsafe to do so were obviously not encouraged, and to watch online. So that was an interesting one. Part 4, we followed up with Chris Scott, who is the owner of the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mira, Alberta, and again, similar to many who have sort of made their stand through the first wave of the pandemic, when we really didn't know the severity, we didn't know what we were dealing with, and we felt that the restrictions were being put in place really to deal with something we were unaware of. But as time went on, and as results were coming out, and people were starting to see some of the data, Chris Scott sort of again drew his line in the sand and said that he didn't feel what the government in Alberta was putting forward was well thought out, was planned. He said at one point, the government said, well, these restrictions are going to be in place for the foreseeable future, and he just felt that he called it throwing spaghetti at the wall. That's what he said in the interview. And in the meantime, people's lives and livelihoods were being destroyed. So he became a real prominent figure when it came to businesses who were being affected by these restrictions, and he made it very public by doing a lot of his statements and position, whatnot, on social media. So a lot of people were able to sort of watch as RCMP came into his establishment and raided it and locked it up. And during the they planned a big protest there, and that's when he was arrested. So a lot of that footage he put on social media so that people were aware truly of what was happening behind the scenes for him. Yeah.
He put up with a lot, and it's interesting to talk to him again. I mean, and with these people, it's good to get the video and listen to you interview them, because they get portrayed by, you know, supporters of the government or supporters of the status quo that, oh, these are crazy people, they're screaming, they're yelling, they're unreasonable. And no, they make rational cases for what their stands were about, and you can realize these are reasonable thinking people that took stands. Even if you don't agree with the stand, they aren't people that are really on the fringe despite the portrayals.
Right. Well, and having said that, that's right. I mean, a lot of mainstream media really worked hard at exactly that, portraying these people that we've interviewed as radicals, as, you know, like you said, the fringe, and these people who are sort of, you know, mad hatters, but really, yeah, sitting down with them and talking with them and hearing their side of the story and understanding why they took the steps that they took is really instrumental in people understanding where these people were at. And, you know, when you're pushed to the brink, especially in a business where you're set to lose everything, I mean, what would you do, kind of a thing?
Yeah, I mean, I know we owned a pub for 5 years, and that was a hard go pre-pandemic. It's a tough business to work in, and you invest. You don't, unless you won the lottery or something. Chances are you leveraged a lot of your possessions to open the place and get it running. You're up to lose everything, not just the business, but your home and everything if that goes down. And
That's
in a
right.
lot of those cases, so.
Yeah, and specifically for Chris Scott's spot, he bought into the Mirror Cafe, or sorry, the Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror, literally less than a year before the pandemic. So, I mean, again, as a business owner, you know, those first few years you're already in the hole.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, it was a tough fight for him, and it still is. However, thankfully, as we reported just about a week or two ago, it's come down that the court has sort of found that most of the convictions against him have been satisfied, and his fine of $20,000 was reduced to $10,000. So yeah, some of these situations going through the courts right now are, you know, they're finding that, in fact, there was decisions made that were unconstitutional. So then part 5, we dove into law enforcement, and many of the whether it was police officers, RCMP, you know, Canadian Armed Forces members that stood out and stood up against what they were being asked to do. They felt many of the orders that they were receiving were going up against the oaths that they took to serve and protect Canadians. So, you know, we had through the Western Standard, we covered several of those officers and military personnel who put out videos of, you know, just sort of pleading with people to understand what was happening, and or in support of what was happening in Ottawa with the Freedom Convoy. Many of those law enforcement personnel were vilified, of course, by mainstream media and whatnot, but they were also reprimanded, and some of them lost their jobs. Several of them actually also spoke out about the mandates and felt that they too did not agree with being forced into taking the vaccines, and so also lost their jobs. So that was interesting, because that interview, we got some perspective from boots on the ground. One of the people we interviewed for that segment was Danny Bulford, which was part of Justin Trudeau's security detail for a period of time. He was a sniper with the RCMP, and you know, he spoke up early on and ended up resigning from the RCMP because of it. But he was boots on the ground at the Freedom Convoy, and sort of came in as the convoy's security detail, and just sort of a liaison between the protesters and the police. And he, you know, again, I mean, he and Constable Brian Dennison from Calgary, Calgary Police Service, 24-year veteran, both served at G8 in Ontario back in the day and said, you know, those were real protests where police were being assaulted and attacked.
Smashing the barricades and
Exactly.
tear gas. Oh, I remember. I've attended those kinds of protests.
Yeah. So the comparison to interview these two incredibly brave men, to interview them and talk to them about their experience at a true protest where lives were at risk and there was very dangerous behavior versus what they saw happening in Ottawa for the Freedom Convoy was interesting. And it's interesting because I think, again, the perception from a lot of the mainstream media, people saw the protesters as being violent, and there was a lot of false information and stories that circulated at that time about, you know, weapons being found or arsonist activity, things like that ended up not actually being the case. Part 6, we dove into last night, actually. We spoke with some medical professionals, Dr. Gregory Chan, who is an Alberta family physician and dealt with many patients who were experiencing vaccine injuries and whatnot. But also we spoke with Dr. Eric Payne, who early on in the fall of 2021 wrote a letter, a lengthy letter to the College of Physicians and Surgeons, as well as the AHS CEO and president at the time, Dr. Verna Yu, to reconsider the mandates. 19-page letter from a doctor who is a pediatric neurologist and a medical researcher. He's worked at Mayo Clinic. He's graduated Harvard. Speaking with these two doctors, it was really interesting to get that behind the scenes perspective on the medical side of things and find out, truly, I mean, again, the mainstream narrative would have everyone sort of following the health advice coming from AHS and or Health Canada. But these doctors saw a very different side of things and dealt with that.
Medical groupthink was something very strongly kind of enforced within their own circles and from government throughout the pandemic. It was kind of an ugly happening, I think, just not allowing any critical comment. I mean, science means asking different questions, even if you're in the minority, and boy, they really close ranks over that period.
Well, and we know from watching other, drugs that have been deemed safe and then found not to be, that science evolves and we watch, and it's evidence-based, right? And then finally, coming up this Thursday, we are going to feature probably one of the most prominent people in the freedom movement was Tamara Lich. And there's argument whether it's Leach or Lich. So Tamara Lich, we're going to be featuring her for Thursday. And ironically, I believe she is up for an award on Thursday from the JCCF. So yeah.
Well, that's good. And she's definitely been a lot of the face of the movement and took the brunt as a person, again, who just started out. I mean, you could see her own accounts early in it that she kind of got caught in the snowball. It wasn't her plan. She's not a professional activist, but paid quite a price with a lot of time in jail for her efforts now.
She did.
So, I mean, it's great. I appreciate you coming in to talk about this and doing this series to make people realize, too, the restrictions are coming down. We're starting to feel a little closer to normal. We're getting there, but we can't forget it's not over. For one, they could always bring them back. And for another, there were a lot of people victimized and pressured, and we can't let them get away with that. We got to review these things, look back with hindsight now and say, was the government right? Was the government wrong? And these interviews really talk to those people who were involved in pushing back on everybody's behalf. So
yeah, it has been a pleasure doing this series for sure.
Great. Well, thanks for the work on it. And thanks for coming in to remind our viewers that they're out there. And catch these on Rumble, on Facebook. I think we've been backing a bit on some of them on YouTube because YouTube keeps kicking us off if we talk about the wrong things. But you can get them on those other two sites, and they're really good watches. So, all right. Well, thanks again, Mel, and we'll see you after the show as we scramble to get ready for the debate.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, thanks,
right.
Cory.
Thanks. So that was the Western Standard's Melanie Risdon with the COVID Freedom Heroes series. It's been really good, and we just really, it's something we haven't been good at the Standards, promoting our own stuff sometimes, not enough and enough. It's, of course, wait until we're done with this important show before you tune in and watch those ones. But they're fantastic viewing, very informative, and talking to the people that the legacy media, of course, won't talk to. Or if they do, it's going to be in an attack piece or derogatory sort of way. So, looking into the comment scroll, I just see some questions. So, I want to address some of that stuff. Some people get some confusion with things. So I see Rosemary Labat Stalker saying, what is the Western Standard? Unapologetically atheist? No, I'm unapologetically atheist. I am. There's a lot of people who work for the Western Standard of different faiths, different degrees of adherence, and all of that. That's not a condition of employment here. And the Western Standard itself doesn't have a stance. We're not a faith-based organization. We're a media organization. And this is an opinion show. So this is where you're going to hear my opinion. I'm not, you don't have to agree with it or anything like that. But I openly state where I stand on things with my faith and, well, lack of, or whatever way you want to put it. But, if you're looking for there's a show called 100 Huntley Street you could watch. It's a little more boring than this, but it's unapologetically faith-based. But I do get frustrated with some people who do mix up opinion with what the publication stands for. I mean, understand that difference, for example, between Dave Naylor and myself. I mean, Dave has his opinions, but he runs the news division, and he makes sure that the opinion stays out of that, and that's news copy. I work in the opinion section. I want it to be opinionated. Different columnists give different opinions. It'd be boring otherwise. It wouldn't be, and if it wasn't opinion involved, it would be news copy. And not all of our columnists share the same opinions. But, how many people I see having a temper tantrum when a columnist writes something they don't like, and they send the emails, and they post it, the Western Standard's terrible, I've had it with them, to rip up my subscription. Think a little harder. You don't have to read or agree with every columnist. That's part of why, if you go to the Western Standard and look under the opinion section, there's lots and lots of columnists who are always putting out their views. And some of them you're going to like and some you won't. But, when people read in, oh, that person said that, thus the Western Standard is thus. No, it's not. That's not the case. That's not how it works, nor with other publications generally either. I mean, there's definitely an editorial leaning within the publication. But don't start talking about, just because I said I'm an atheist, that suddenly the Western Standard is an atheist organization. Of course not. It's just me, guys. Just me. And I don't know about others out there. I don't really ask them about, other people's faiths. It's their business if they want to openly have them. And that's part of what I was trying to talk about when I mentioned my atheism anyways, was that I can still not have faith, but respect the rights of others to have and practice theirs. That's what this world needs to get more of. It's not my bag, but I'm okay if you do it. And that can apply to people with strong faiths or without. I mean, we've also seen some of the worst atrocities in human history done by people in the name of their faiths. I mean, look at the Inquisition, look at some of the things that were done, or things against people because they didn't like their faith, such as the Holocaust. But either way, I mean, I'll say those things. So just, remember, guys, it's opinion. You don't have to agree with it. It's mine, though. It doesn't always represent the entire standard. I mean, if I went right off the edge and gave some really crazy opinions, don't worry, Derek would rein me in and say, okay, that's enough. I mean, there's some degree where still the publication has to be responsible for what they publish and who put it out there. But please distinguish between the opinion people and the state of the publication as a whole. Or other people saying, when I've had that when I get on social media, I read your column, it's so biased, you're an improper news organization. How would you put that biased stuff up? Look, it's why it says opinion. Of course it's biased. If it's not biased, then it's not opinion, and it's boring. And Cindy saying, the old opinions like our arseholes thing. Yeah, it's true. But everybody's got one. But that's what we're here to do is share it, whether it's in the comment scroll, or of course, me babbling at length about my opinions and our columnists writing them. So, just try to distinguish between those differences, though. I mean, we saw some of that with this leadership race. A lot of people have been getting pretty, excited. They get passionate about the candidates they're supporting and everything. I write a column that's critical of one candidate, and the other candidates, or the candidate goes crazy, or their supporters go crazy. And then I write one that's favorable of another, and the people opposing them go, guys, I'm going to be critical of any and every one of them when I feel, in my opinion, they stepped the wrong way. And I'll celebrate them and be nice to them when I think they've done something right. It's just basically as simple as that. All right, enough of that, Megan. Let's see what we got for some other news stuff to talk about before the next guest gets on here. But yeah, somebody was talking about that with the that person who wrote the column saying she was working as an election worker. No, she didn't know who. Somebody said, "Oh, how does she know who voted which way?" She didn't. If you read the column she wrote, she talked about, she was saying in her head, "I wonder if that person voted conservative, because that would mean that person hates me." But no, she didn't have any idea to know who voted which way or not. Yesterday I wrote on or I had my opening monologue on the Alberta Provincial Police Force and why I'd like to see one. And again, we could screw that up as well. Hey, just so you could have a smaller version of the same thing if we don't make it better. We're looking at some of the federal stuff that comes out. I'm still kind of laughing at this one because suddenly it became a big issue when it was discovered that, the RCMP has been snooping on people's personal phones and personal information. We knew about that for a while, but it wasn't really a huge issue until they discovered, wait a minute, they've been spying on MPs too? Members of Parliament? Yeah. Hey, guess what? You got to be citizens like the rest of us. And now it's a big deal, of course. And Brenda Lucki, Trudeau's little appointed little head of the RCMP there, the one who pokes into criminal investigations such as the biggest mass shooting in Canadian history on his behalf, allegedly. Said she refuses to say. She won't even tell the House of Commons committee whether they used it to monitor MPs. Well, who do you answer to? If she doesn't answer to a Commons committee, who does she answer to? Is she really directly that up Trudeau's, backdoor there? I mean, you should be answering these things. You're an employee of the nation. You're supposed to be serving us. There's so many of these civil servants. The politicians are bad enough, but these senior civil servants, don't forget, you work for us, even if poorly. And if you're asked by an ethics committee, you should be bloody well answering. What do you mean you won't tell if you've been using it to monitor members of Parliament? This is important. You don't have to tell what you saw on that. I think it means that, yes, you were. And I don't like knowing that a federal police force is digging into the personal communications of our elected officials, especially one who, again, seems to be so grovelingly beholden to the Prime Minister. Would they share incorrect information on behalf of Trudeau to try and shame a member of Parliament who had something on their phone that they didn't want shared? Where does this go? This country is in a bad way. So, I mean, the committee passed a motion in July asking for a list of warrants or any other information, but they haven't gotten any yet. And it shouldn't be that hard to get. And when she's refusing to answer, that's basically saying a yes. So the next questions are, who were you spying on? And what information did you garner? Why, of course, is another nice big one, isn't it? So stuff interesting, worth watching. Here's, speaking of opinion, here's some fun things. The Globe and Mail, that was making the rounds on social media yesterday. They're seeking a new columnist for their opinion team, but he or she must be vaccinated. They have to prove vaccination status. Why? And somebody said, oh, it's because that person will be stationed overseas. For an opinion columnist? I got the wrong gig here. Well, I understand we've got limited budgets. We don't, but I mean, opinion folks don't typically get shipped out. And also, most of the world doesn't have these vaccine mandates anymore. So the vaccine won't make a difference with that. But I mean, hey, it's the Globe. Well, actually, I shouldn't say. I was going to say the Globe Mail is a private business, but no, they suckle on the taxpayers' teat for bailouts and money as well. So no, I won't be as forgiving with these guys. If they're fully private, hey, do whatever the hell you want. Fine. But why? What is the point of this virtue signaling with an opinion person saying they must be vaccinated? It does not make any difference to the safety of fellow employees. I think all it is they're looking for somebody of the right mindset. So they know if they're vaccinated, then they know that this was somebody that, be able to push their agenda a little further. It's another way to ask without asking. Let's see. Cheryl saying, I knew a 16-year-old who ran away and the RCMP were able to locate her with just her phone and locate her phone when it was turned off. Yeah, like these phones they've got everything. They've got our information. They got our location. They've got our personal communications. They got pictures on them. I mean, it's not a minor affair to have somebody accessing our phone. And in circumstances like that, with a warrant, I can see reasons why the RCMP should, or other police forces, be able to access phones, but not on a whim. You see, this was a thing where they basically got a blanket policy and they won't even tell you who or when or why. With a warrant means you documented which phones, which people, what you were looking into, why you were violating that privacy, and how. So yeah, if you're trying to find a young person who's lost or run away, sure. Also, it's an interesting story. I'm still getting more details on that, but I talk about that now and then when my pub got repeatedly robbed by those guys that turned out to be murderous thugs. They killed 2 people later on, but they robbed my pub a couple of times. They robbed a number of other rural businesses in our area over a crime spree for a while. The way the police caught them was actually, some security footage from a Bragg Creek pub, because these morons were actually scouting the pub in the same outfits that they came back that night in and robbed it with. So even though they had a mask on their face, they had the same clothes, so it wasn't that hard to figure out. And then once that got shared, they got all sorts of tips, through social media on who these guys actually were. But still, you need more evidence. So what the RCMP did was it was RCMP, and they cooperated with Calgary Police. But they got warrants, and they watched all of these guys' phones with their locations. And they've watched and monitored and watched and monitored. And suddenly they saw all the phones were all getting together. I believe it was a Northeast business up in Northeast Calgary, all at the same time. They saw them all moving into the same spot. So the police all rushed in, and sure enough, they were all getting ready to break into another business, and they caught them right in the act and nailed them. That was a good use. But you see, they didn't just get blanket access to these guys' phones like that, though. They had to get warrants. They had to go before a justice and say, this is why we need to go into these people's personal items and access it. And I mean, I think that's a realistic cause. And if it was done frivolously, the judge is saying, no, I'm not giving you permission for that. And so, I mean, I'm not fully ruling things up, but right now what we're talking about is just some blanket, abilities to search into things, and even members of parliament, apparently. And we wonder about a lot of that. That's the things. That's why people can't forget just how intrusive and odious and nasty the Emergencies Act was, because it suspended a lot of individual rights. And that's the sort of thing that happens when your rights are suspended, because then suddenly you can give the state police, and I'll call it that, the federal police, the ones controlled by Trudeau, the ones where he directly appoints the head of their force, you suddenly give them this authority to set aside your individual rights. And I mean, they could arrest people without warrant. They could search without warrant. They could press people into forced labor, as they were talking about with tow trucks. But also they could get in and search your personal items. And now they're refusing to tell who. And I got a feeling there's going to be more follow-up on that. And hey, Liberal MPs, they might have been looking in yours too. And I'm sure there's got to be at least a few Liberal MPs who really wouldn't want the contents of their phone to be exposed publicly. Maybe wonder, when you give the authorities too many things to powers and abilities, it can turn back and bite you in the butt. Here's another beauty. So it's the federal subsidized art programs. Being told, this is the Canada Council for the Arts, must embrace social activism. So not just promoting art, they have to make sure it's social activism. Of course, it won't be conservative social activism. It'll be woke social activism. It's talking about should support social justice and addressing, inclusion and diversity, all fuzzy things. Why is that going in our arts budget? I just want pretty things out in the street, guys. I understand art can be controversial and address things and stuff like that. But once you start going into the tax pool, once you force all of us to pay for it, once we have no more choice in the matter any longer and we have to pay for it, then I think you should stay the hell out of activism, because that's not what we paid our taxes for, is it? But apparently that's what these guys have for their motivation and their rationale. So it's bad enough with the bad art we got. And Calgary's been notorious for it. I guess Montreal outdid it. They did a blue ring that was even more expensive and than the Calgary one. People familiar with it. The big blue ring. It's funny, the left have been embracing it. I got into an online debate with this ding-dong Courtney Penner. She's a progressive member of council in Calgary. She was talking about how wonderful the blue ring is, and it's a part of Calgary. No, it was $500,000 pissed away for a blue circle on a lamppost on an overpass halfway between the airport and a residential area made by German artists. Don't celebrate that. That was an abuse of our trust. It was an abuse of our dollars that was put into something like that, as well as a number of other examples all over the city. There's those things that people thought was a bunch of construction waste. That's over on the west end of town. It was because there's a bunch of iron bars and rocks. They thought it was junk from a bunch of road construction. No, it was a public art program from some New York artists, and it cost, that one was a couple $1 million, if I recall. All right, I see my guest in the lobby here, and I am going to cut over to him right away, and we'll discuss that other issue we wanted to get onto today. So this is David McLellan of Social Catfish. And hey there, David, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going? I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you joining us today. This is an interesting subject. It was a very interesting release, and the services you guys provide. But maybe, for our viewers and listeners, if you could kind of give in a nutshell a background on what catfishing is and how that puts people at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. So catfishing is essentially pretending to be somebody else online. And so when we started the company 8 years ago, we thought it was this thing where you had a bunch of insecure people on the internet, using other people's pictures in, a semi-harmless way. And what we quickly realized is like most of the catfishing that actually happens are people that are actually trying to scam people out of money.
Yeah, and this can be very serious. I mean, not just scamming people out of money. I mean, it can bankrupt them or cause a lot of social damage, or I mean, the humiliation factor. Just like anybody with online ripoffs, they don't want to report, or could even lead to suicide if it's bad enough.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a huge network, about 1 million plus people, and what we found out is only about 1 in every 3 people report these types of scams because they're too embarrassed. And so Social Catfish, what my company does, we help people find and verify people online with a focus on online safety. So that like weird phone number that you get that calls you, if you're meeting somebody online for the first time, or you just want to know where your information is online to be safe, you can use a service like ours, and that's what we do.
Yeah, so your service kind of covers 2 fronts in a sense. I mean, there's not just the people who have been contacted by perhaps a false identity out there, but somebody might be using your pictures and identity and contacting others as well out there, and you don't know it.
Yeah, absolutely. You'd be shocked how often that happens. Anybody who's public on the internet is, a potential victim. So what happens is these scammers, they go online, they find profiles that have a lot of pictures, they download all the pictures or screenshot all the pictures, and then they put them on dating sites, social networks, forums, chat rooms, basically anywhere where you can chat with people. And they use those pictures and they build this backstory to meet people and coerce them into giving them money.
Yeah, so I mean, it's good to have a service though where you can verify these, because I mean, not everything on the internet's bad. I mean, I met my wife through a social media site 17 years ago. I mean, more of the primordial online meetings, and still to this day, she's putting up with me. I mean, it was a good match, and we did all right. So I mean, you don't want to lose all the value of being able to meet people and interact online, but with those risks out there, I guess you want to mitigate them as much as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we say this all the time that, you go to school, right? And you learn about math and science and history. You even learn about sex and drugs, but you don't learn about online safety. And so those are things that have to change. That's why our service exists, and we do all the work that we do. But 100%, the internet's this amazing, beautiful place that you can learn and you can meet people and interact, especially during COVID. We saw a lot of that. But it's also still the wild, wild west, and the internet's still in its infancy, even though it's been around for, 30 plus years. It's continually changing. We're seeing so many things change. And what we've learned is that every time technology changes or a new platform emerges, a new rush of scams comes out.
Well, then safety is another aspect you mentioned. There's a lot of cases we read, unfortunately, more and more of child luring that goes on. And sometimes it's been a profile of a grown person pretending to be younger and luring in a younger person into eventually meeting in person, or things like that. That can be terribly dangerous. Does your service provide things for parents to be able to apply, or things like that to check, or how does that work?
So what you can do with our service is you can go and plug in information. So you can go and put in a picture, a phone number, a username, and you can see anything that's attached to that's public online. We call them footprints, So most people, my name's David McLellan, and I go and I have usernames online, and if you go and create a new profile online, those usernames are typically, using the same username is typically easier for me to remember. And usually using similar profile pictures. And so we use those things to validate like who people are online. So if your children are talking to somebody, first of all, I don't let my children talk to anybody that they don't know online. That's really the solution. But
good rule to start with.
If you're talking to somebody, or somebody's talking to somebody online, you can always throw in a picture. You can put in a username, a phone number, an email, and you can see the backstory on that and see how long it's been in existence, if it's been reported for fraud or scams, if it's attached to somebody with a different name, which raises a red flag, and we'll even give you ages if we have it. So a lot of things you can do to just look up some basic information, do it very quickly, and just make sure you're making the right decisions.
So with a lot of this that's going on, I mean, particularly with the ripoffs, is this like organized groups, or these overseas groups, call center type things, I guess you could say, or is it often domestic people doing these impersonations?
Yeah, so it's definitely a combination of the two. We typically see most of these scams overseas. So in places like Lagos, Nigeria, Russia, the Philippines, China. And so, typically in those countries, they're not really scared of getting caught. the problem is the jurisdiction. Like, our countries don't talk to each other very well, and we don't work with each other very well. And so, we tend to see a lot of scams over there. People in the US definitely get involved. But they typically get arrested. There's people in Canada, get involved, but they're typically get arrested because we all have more jurisdiction. The people that do this in the States tend to be people that are become money mules. So somebody's contacted them from overseas, said, "Hey, will you do this for me? Will you help me out?" They become a money mule and start money laundering, and now they get in a position where they can get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and in looking at your site there at socialcatfish.com, I see you offer a lot of resources as well, like just to help educate people. I mean, not just the ability to check these profiles, but a lot of blog postings, reviewing different dating apps and things such as that, so people have some background to start with.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time doing things that we don't necessarily get paid for, and so. But we believe it's really important to educate people and show people what's really happening. With the polling that we've done, the people we've talked to, most people don't come out and don't report these types of scams. There's a massive amount of money that's being lost every year, hundreds of millions of dollars. And if we don't report the stuff, we don't educate people, this is going to continue to get worse.
Well, and speaking of reporting, though, so as well, once somebody, if they've checked a profile, they found out, yes, this is a scammer, this isn't legitimate, are there ways that you guys will follow through, at least to hopefully start wiping that profile off or flagging it for other people in the future, or at least, trying to catch these guys a bit?
Yeah, so we have an internal group where we go and we have volunteers that go and report fake profiles. As you can imagine, it's a massive task. I mean, we report about 1,500 profiles a day, on various social networks. What you can do is if you do see fake profiles on social media or dating sites or specific apps, like most of those have reporting features or functions. And so we highly encourage you go and report those. Doesn't mean that we'll always get taken down, but we go and highly suggest that you go and look at those and fill those out.
Yeah, and I mean, it provides a service too that can give a person peace of mind. I mean, maybe they're developing what does seem to be a promising relationship, and it can help them relax when they've checked out the profile. Hey, this is real. I can carry on and perhaps meet somebody and get more personal. But you can lose that inhibition, I guess. Well, I shouldn't. That's the wrong term for it. But your worries about it. So it's a valuable service that way too. It doesn't always have to be a negative outcome.
Yeah, I mean, we just had somebody come to us the other day, and they met somebody at a concert. And they really hit it off, and they came to us and said, "Hey, look, I just have a picture. Can you find this woman?" And so, we said, "Hey, look, what we'll do is if we can find her, we'll contact her. And if she wants to get in contact with you, we'll essentially matchmake." And so we found her Facebook profile. We messaged her, and she's like, "Sure, send in my information." So, I mean, there are definitely some good outcomes, and not everything we do is involving scams. Sometimes just people coming to us to be proactive, but we definitely do that sort of thing too.
Yeah, no, I appreciate where you went. At first I thought, whoa, these guys are facilitating stalking. Oh no, you did check with her before having more contact.
Yeah, we don't give any information out until we get the A-OK to do so.
Right. So is it a subscription sort of service then for what you guys provide? And then you have kind of an ongoing access?
Yeah, so there are a few different plans that we have. You can run very, very basic searches for free. It is a paid subscription to actually use the full service, but it's unlimited searching. So for a little under like $7, you can go and you can run unlimited searching. And then for a little under $30, you can have a monthly subscription access to all the services. We do have what's called an in-depth search, where you can hire us and we'll do the searching. So we use tools that we don't use for everyday users. So things like people typically come to us if they've been involved in like crypto scams. And so we have tools to go and track and trace, wallet addresses for crypto scams and look at other types of public information. So that one costs a little over $300 to do.
Okay, well, no, it's great to know. I mean, as I said, the internet is a big wild west in a way. I mean, that's part of what the beauty of the internet is, but unfortunately, there's a lot of hazards too, and people can't necessarily pay attention to everything. So having a service to help protect themselves and feel, safer and more comfortable is is a really great idea, and it seems to be doing quite well out there. Is there more information you'd like to share on how people can check out your service and get in touch with it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely go to socialcatfish.com. It's a great resource. We put out a YouTube video every Wednesday. And so we have a channel called Scamfish, where we actually take people that have been victims of online scams and we profile exactly what happened to them. We break them down. We do real investigations. We do 52 episodes a year, but they're really educational because we break down exactly how the scams work, why they worked, and all the information we found out. So you can check us out on YouTube too.
Well, that's excellent. And it lets people know too. I mean, this can happen to anybody. You know, they shouldn't be ashamed. I mean, there's some very smart, subtle scammers out there, and if you got nailed, it's still better to speak up and follow through rather than let them get away with it. You know, you're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on today to talk about that service and for putting it together. You know, the more we can see those kind of predatory people on there taken to task, and the more other people can enjoy the internet properly is all the better. So thanks again, and maybe we'll talk again down the road.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. That was David McLellan of socialcatfish.com. And yeah, you know, you hear that term catfishing and things like that. And for ones like me, you're getting a little more gray in the muzzle. I don't necessarily know every term and so on, but you know, that sort of stuff was even happening way back when Jane and I met online as well. Actually, there's people that, you know, putting false identities out and trying to shame other people and things like that with their pictures online that they can steal them. So it's a service to consider. You know, if you're getting contacted by somebody, if they're looking into things, you got a little bit of information right off the bat. You can check it out, image reverse searches, things like that you don't necessarily have the tech ability or have the background to look into. These guys will do it. So yes, that was an interesting chat there. It's an interesting service, so check them out. All right, I'm going to close things up pretty quickly here, guys, just because we are going to be getting ready for that debate tonight and it'll be streaming. And if there's still some tickets left, I think you can check it out on the westernstandardonline.com for that. And it's going to be at Rooftop YYC. So that debate's going to start about 5:30 tonight. It says live at 4:30, but I believe that's when the doors open. And it'll be running about 5:30. So let's see, who have I got tomorrow? I've already forgotten. Me and my muddled head. We got a busy day. Yes, we got David Millard Haskell coming on. He's a social scientist, university professor. We're going to be talking about CRT. And I'm going to have David Creighton on to chat about his column and some of those other things. So thanks for tuning in today, guys. It's always appreciated. And check us out tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. sharp.